Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whenever it is for you. For me, it is just past midnight on Friday, August the 29th, 2025, which makes this the news and events for Thursday, August 28th, day 1282 of Vladimir Putin's war of aggression against the people of Ukraine. How do you do? I'm Peter Alexievich, and this is the Live at 5 from Kyiv, coming to you live from this major European capital, currently under siege and still smoldering from last night's attacks on this city. I see the peeps are coming in. Integral's here. Anthony Tommy Tom, Super User. How you all doing? Hey, Bjorn. Hey, Mad Mike. Hey, Pugga Mahone. Evening, Gary. G2, Truth Hurts. How you guys doing? Marius, love the duets, pal. Thanks, buddy. Evening, Evie. Hey, Chris Perry. Van, you are right on time, brother. Ha ha, nice. Hey, Di. Evening, David. How you doing? Thanks, Mox. Hey, Dawn Patrols. Richard Prexis is here. Nightshade is here. Guys, if you don't follow Nightshade, give Nightshade a follow. You know, Nightshade manages the Peter's Peeps groups on the Book of Faces, and he's doing lots of daily updates on Ukraine. The U.S. has approved a potential, like I said, now this is something, I don't even have this in my list tonight. The U.S. has approved a potential $825 million arms sale to Ukraine. Good news, more good news. Evening, Fleur. Are you coming in on Stuart's convoy on October 1st? Hey, Ted. Canada's in the house. Thanks, Commander Cody. Evening, Alice. Oh, no, Marius. You didn't make a duet with one of my videos. You've duetted like, I don't know, half a dozen in the last week. I don't know if that's your thing, doing duets or what, but no, dude, you've duetted a bunch of my shit this week. Hey, Eli. Hey, Laddie. Nice. So David Frazier does work with Jeeps for Peace. And according to what David just said there, now I had talked to Stuart. Actually, I talked to Stuart today. And he said that October 1st, the next convoy was coming in, and David just said it's going to be about 70 vehicles, which is tremendous. There is such a shortage of vehicles here. As a matter of fact, and the reason I had reached out to Stuart is because I know of a local air defense unit that is afraid that they are about to lose their vehicle. And a mobile air defense unit without a vehicle is not a mobile unit. That's a fucking problem. And there are no pickup trucks in Eastern Europe right now. It's very hard to find a pickup truck. Hey, Maddie Wright. Hey, Neil Steven. So if anybody's got a bead on a pickup truck in Eastern Europe that we could give to this mobile air defense unit so they remain mobile, I would love to hear your suggestions. That's for sure. Hey, Steve-O. Okay, so let's take a look at today's happenings. There really is a lot going on. And we should start with last night's missile and drone attacks on Ukraine. Last night's missile and drone attacks, depending on how you count these things, it's basically was one of the top 5 largest attacks of the entire war. 629 aerial targets came in, 598 drones, 31 missiles, including 2 Kinzhal hypersonic missiles. Now, the good news here is that they shot down one of the Kinzhals, which is very difficult to do. And so half of the hypersonic missiles last night were taken out. In fact, 84% of all missiles, the combination cruise and ballistic missiles, were taken out before they could reach their targets. 563 drones, or 94% of the drones, were taken out. So it's not like the mobile defense units, the Air Force, all the guys that participate in this defense of the skies of Ukraine were on the ball last night. And I'm sure they all made tremendous sacrifices to deliver these results. The problem is 16% of the missiles still got through. Now, what that meant here in Kyiv was an entire apartment block demolished. And at least at the current count, because we know that the count is going to go up because there are people buried in the rubble. Right now it's at 19. 19 dead here in Kyiv alone. 4 of them children, mind you, asleep in their beds when their apartment building caught a Russian missile. And that is not the only thing hit in Kyiv last night. It appears as though the Russians targeted both the British Council offices and the EU mission to Ukraine. Now, that is a direct assault on the properties of these NATO members, I would point out. Lots of people are calling it Article 5. It's not going to happen, right? The political will doesn't exist for NATO to get involved in this thing. So it's not going to happen. But it has caused some major diplomatic incidences. Ursula von der Leyen summoned the chief Russian diplomat to Brussels to explain this attack on EU property. The British Prime Minister has summoned the the Russian ambassador to the Great Britain to explain what is going on. And that is more that both of those, the EU and the British have done. That's more that they have done than the United States did when Russia last week sent 2 Caliber cruise missiles to level an American-owned factory here in Ukraine. In fact, Donald Trump's response to the destruction of American interests in Ukraine, which he said would protect Ukraine, right? Remember, he said, me being here, Donald fucking Trump, means that Vladimir Putin won't hit American interests in Ukraine. Bullshit. They just leveled a factory to the ground owned by the Americans. And all that Trump did was basically walk away from the failed negotiations after his red carpet treatment of Putin in Alaska failed to get him any results, and rather embolden Putin further, because that's all that's going to happen. As long as you appease him, right? The big lie of all the lies that the Russians have tried to sell us on, the biggest lie is the lie that they can be appeased. They can't be. The time for talk is over. All this bullshit about peace with the Russians. And what is their response? 629 aerial targets overnight last night, and dozens of civilians dead across the country, many more injured. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Anybody who thinks that they can talk to Putin or Trump is living in a deluded world. Now, in spite of last night's attacks, I'm going to say something that I really have very rarely said here. I'm going to suggest to you that Ukraine is, in fact, winning. Remember, what have I always said? I've always said both sides are losing, but Russia is losing faster. No, not anymore. Ukraine is winning. The Ukrainians have the formula to destroy Russia, and they are implementing it every single day. Targeted, precise strikes, blinding Russian radars. We've seen that all through Crimea, along the the temporarily occupied territories and inside Russia itself, destroying railroads, bridges, and exerting fire control over Russian ground lines of communication are choking Russian logistics off. We are now seeing entire companies, even one unit of people, Russian soldiery, surrender en masse because they don't have any food, water, or ammunition. Russian lines of communication are extended, stretched, and they are unable to resupply themselves in anything that we would regard as the basic manner. The campaign against oil depots, pipelines, and refineries are creating not merely a civil crisis inside Russia, because that's happening, right? People don't want to sit in a kilometer-long line to not get the gas finally when they get up there because what they put in their car isn't available. What have I been saying? Empires die from the fringes out. And what we are seeing at the fringes of the empire, all the way out in the east, 11 time zones away from me, in Kyiv, which is a Russian territory that they seized from the Japanese at the end of World War II and never gave back. In Kyiv, if you're a Russian citizen, you can't buy gasoline. It's not available to you. There's a priority for military and business. And if you're not one of them, you can't even buy gasoline now out there. The diesel shortages at the time of harvest are causing great consternation to the farmers of Russia. All of this seething, bubbling, civil unrest beneath the surface of the Russian veneer. Without diesel, the ability of Russian Federation forces to respond to changing conditions is deeply compromised. Ukraine has unlocked the key to defeating Russia, and it is the impending economic collapse brought on by the attacks against Russian oil infrastructure. Oh, pardon me. Now, again, last night, yeah, Ukraine got hit last night, but that didn't stop them from hitting the Russians. Oh, no. We had 2 oil refineries. Now, this is a big deal, in my opinion, because these 2 oil refineries between them represent about 7% of all of Russia's refining capacity. Now, we already know that Russian refining capacity has been reduced by 17%, 1.1 million barrels a day. It appears from last night's attacks that we can count on Russian oil refining capacity dropping another 5 to 6%. That's almost a quarter. That's almost not refining 1 in 4 barrels of oil. That's going to be a problem. It's going to be a problem. Now, what got hit last night was one of the Rosneft oil refineries in Samara. This was a huge drone strike. Locals reported at least 12 explosions. It could have been as many as 20 drones striking the refinery. There is still burning. A huge fire there is raging, even as we are talking now, 16 hours later, after the last strike. And that's an important point to make. The last strike was in daylight. The attacks on this refinery came in at least two waves. In the middle of the night, there's video of them trying to shoot down drones using small arms fire. Then there's more video from the early morning hours when the sun is up. And again, the second wave of drones is coming in and they're trying to shoot them down. Where was air defense? The refinery is burning. You've got air defense locally, and yet there was silence except for small arms fire. Ooh, I feel pretty. You know, I'm not a big fan of gifts. I'm really not. We're having serious discussions here. And butterfly masks don't reinforce that. Plus, TikTok takes half or more of what you paid for the gift. Somebody sent me a gift one time, a racing car. It was $100 it cost them. I got $30. Ridiculous. It's a bad thing. Join my Patreon if you want to support me here. Now, so last night, so this fire is still on, so this oil refinery is still on fire, as is the other one, Fipsky. But where was air defense? The first wave of drones came in around 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. Second wave of drones came in daylight, around 6:30, 7 a.m. Why wasn't, they don't have it. They don't have the air defense. There are so many, Russia's such a big country. There are holes, gaps in the air defense. That's clear. It's as holy as Swiss cheese. Now, at the oil refinery in Samara, the crude distillation unit, CDU-11, which processes 9,000 tons of crude oil daily into valuable refined oil products like diesel, kerosene, etc., as well as CDU Unit 9, which processes 5,000 tons daily. Their destruction represents 75 to 85% of the refining capacity from Samara offline. Then we have the hit on a Fipsky, which was also targeted. I'm sorry. On the subject of Samara, officials are actually saying that the place will be shut down completely for the time being until a damage assessment can be done and repairs can be done. So that means the entire refinery that processes 9 million tons of crude oil a year, 4% of everything inside Russia, is down. It's not quite clear how bad the damage is at Fipsky, although there is a large fire burning there near the cracking tower. We're getting reports now that the pipeline, the Moscow Ryazan pipeline, which feeds the Ust-Luga export terminal, is being attacked again. Now, the last attack last week meant that Ust-Luga had to drop its exports to 350,000 barrels a day. That's half of its normal volume. And it had to shut them down because the pipeline simply is not there anymore the way that it had been. That's huge. Think about 350,000 barrels a day out of that one port aren't going out onto the open market. Now, one would expect that we're going to see a spike in world oil prices because of that. However, that may not be the case, simply because the economic data coming out of the United States is so bad that we're on the verge of a global recession. That seems pretty clear to everybody. And the economic data coming out of the United States is only going to get worse as we move to 30 days since the tariffs were imposed, 60 days. And Saudi is pumping more Bamba Squeezer, right? So it's almost like the market has a built-in buffer thanks to that Saudi production. But I would point out that the Saudis have decreased production, if I'm not mistaken, by 5 million barrels a day across OPEC over the last 3 years. And they've only put another 2 million barrels a day back on the market. So we're still not where we were in terms of production 3 years ago. But it's certainly something to watch. Now, some of you are going to particularly enjoy this one. But the Washington Post is reporting that 3 of the 5 Nobel Committee votes have openly criticized Donald Trump, and he does not have the votes to get the Nobel. I mean, it's ridiculous that we're even talking about this. It's ridiculous that anybody believes him when he says stupid things like, I've already ended 7 wars. I've brought peace to the world. I've made DC safe. This bullshit from this narcissistic pig is beyond the pale. It's just beyond. Now, this is what the head of the committee has criticized him openly for his attacks on the free press in the United States. Kristen Clement wrote one of the Nobel votes. Trump is well on his way to dismantling American democracy. Truer words were never spoken. Brie Larson, another Nobel Committee member, wore a hat that said, make human rights great again, implicitly criticizing Trump. That's 3 out of the 5 Nobel Committee that are not going to vote for Trump and have openly criticized him. So I think that this notion of Trump as a great peacemaker is a load of shit that nobody should pay attention to. And it appears that the Nobel Committee isn't either. Now, somebody asked about the boat. Did the boat sink? What that person was likely talking about was the Buoyan M class frigate, which is a missile ship, right? These are one of the ships. Last night, we saw 20 caliber cruise missiles come into this country, targeting civilians. Some of them were likely launched from this ship out in the Sea of Azov. This ship was targeted by drones of the Special Operation Forces and the Ukrainian Military Intelligence Directorate, the GUR. The strike was successful. We have good video that shows at least one drone striking the radar mast, blinding the ship for future operations, and another drone, definitely one targeting the hull, potentially some others targeting the launchers, where the missiles are launched from on the ship. Now, if the missile launchers and the radar are out, this ship is going to be in dry dock for a while. It's just that simple, right? It's going to be in dry dock for a while. But we don't believe it was sunk. It does appear that the corvette was able to return to the dock under its own power, as we have no evidence of tugboats in the area. A 3D designer from Lviv has created a one-time use net launcher. So it looks like a handgun, except it's got a big fat barrel, and tucked inside that barrel with some compressed air is a net. And this net can be fired 20 meters, about 60 feet. The idea here is that for those troops on the front line threatened in close quarters with drones, this is a last-ditch effort to try to stop the drone. It has been, according to the designer, field tested in battle, and he cited one example where a drone was following a vehicle and a guy took the drone out with his net gun from inside the moving vehicle. So it shows great promise as a potential life-saving weapon on the front line. Okay, I assume the moderators took care of this Davo person. I don't see him anymore. Zelensky says that as of today, quote, we are using our own long-range weapons domestically produced, and frankly, are no longer discussing these strikes with the United States. These comments come amid the controversy and the revelation that DoD policy had quietly changed a few months ago to restrict the Ukrainians' use of ATACMS on Russian soil. If you guys remember, the Ukrainians were limited to using long-range weapons on their own territories. They could not use them inside Russia for a long time. Then the North Koreans sent troops to Kursk and were massing tens of thousands of troops right across the border. And so America finally grew a set of balls and told Ukraine that they could use those long-range weapons on those troop concentrations on the other side of the borders. But even that use was restricted to Kursk, Belgorod, and down Rostov. That was it. Then sometime this spring, under Trump, the Pentagon quietly reinstated that long-range ban. And so the Ukrainians have solved the problem themselves. In the crucible of this war, when an emergent democracy should be able to turn to the leaders of the free world and say, we need your help. Oh, and by the way, you promised to help us back in 1994. Remember that? And rather than get that help, these people have been left on their own to come up with solutions like the Flamingo missile, like the Long Neptune, like the long-range drones that they've produced. All of that inside the crucible of this war where there is not enough of anything for anybody. It's a shame on the soul of Western civilization that we will not soon scrub clean. It is a testament to Ukrainian resiliency and resolve in the face of a genocide, the likes of which Europe has not seen since 1944. Serhiy Bratchuk, who's a Ukrainian Armed Forces spokesperson, confirmed that the long-range Neptune was used to strike a drone factory in Krasnodar, as well as targets at sea. He also confirmed that the Flamingo was used to sink the Russian cargo vessel Olyaport 4 out in the Caspian Sea. Many times here on this channel, we have talked about the frustration that those ships just sail from Iran to Russia with drones for the Russians to murder Ukrainians with. We've talked about the frustration that the Ukrainians don't have a long-range tool that can hit those ships or a way to interdict them. Now it appears that the Ukrainians do. And that would be the Flamingo long-range missile with a 3,000-kilometer range, about 2,000 miles. It puts the entire Caspian Sea into its sights. And that's a big deal. Now, the other big deal in the news today that we're getting from that part of the world is Azerbaijan. The Azeris, as we all know, have seen relationships with Moscow deteriorating over the course of this war. We've seen Azeri civilians murdered by Russian police in custody up in Ekaterinburg. We've seen the Russians shoot down Azeri civilian aircraft. We've seen the Russians most recently intentionally strike in a series of strikes and destroy the Azeri company SOCAR, that's their national gas company, SOCAR oil depot and gas facility, transit facility out in Odessa, destroyed. Meanwhile, the Azeris have turned around and stolen all of the Kazakh gas and oil coming out of Kazakhstan from the Russians. That's all now being transferred through the Trans-Balkan pipeline to Europe. So the Europeans don't have to worry about buying Russian gas. The Azeris, the Armenians, the Turks, it's led very much, I think, to a cooling of relations between Baku, the capital of Azerbaijan, and Yerevan, the capital of Armenia. Remember, these guys just fought a war over Nagorno-Karabakh. Tensions there have been high. And yet they see that they have a common enemy, the Russians, and a friend in the Kazakhs. And together with Turkey, they can take all that Russian oil, or all that Kazakh oil, that the Russians were making money on transing it to the Black Sea, and just pipe it direct to Europe. And that's what they've done. And the Russians are none too happy about any of it. So they are striking, just like they struck the British Council building today, just like they struck the EU mission to Ukraine today, just like they struck an American factory last week. They burned down... They burned down SOCAR's oil facility in Odessa. The Azeris are not taking this lightly. The Azeris they started sending humanitarian aid to the Ukrainians a while ago, and they recently approved $2 million package for rebuilding energy infrastructure. Now they're sending weapons. This is a big deal. The Azeris have upgraded. Now, this did not just happen overnight. So apparently the Azeris have been thinking about this for a while, and they made the moves so that when they wanted to pull the trigger, they could do it right out, because they upgraded their artillery plants to produce thousands more Soviet standard munitions of the 122 millimeter and 152 millimeter artillery shells. Now, the fact that they are producing these is important to the Ukrainians, because the Ukrainians have a lot of old Soviet stuff. They have lots of 122 millimeter cannons. They have lots of 152 millimeter howitzers, but they can't get the ammunition. It's estimated that with the Azeri shells in place to arm the artillery groups that use Soviet-era artillery, Ukraine will be able to increase artillery strikes at certain sections of the front as much as 30% over the next 30 days. That's a big deal. That's a big deal. When the Russians targeted Azeri energy interests in Ukraine, it was to intimidate the Azeris, to knock them into line, which Russia thinks it can do with all of its former Soviet vassal states, right? You will do our will. You live inside our sphere of influence, and you shouldn't think about living anywhere else. Destroying the oil depots and gas transfer facility in Odessa was exactly the message Russia sent to Baku. And Aliyev doubled down and said, fuck you. Not only have they scaled up their own defense industry because they may very well need those shells soon themselves. Not only are they aligning more closely with the West and with Western interests, turning their backs on Moscow, they are now supporting Kyiv openly with both humanitarian and lethal aid. Now, I don't want to give anybody the wrong idea that Aliyev is some kind of a hero or on the right side of history. It's still a brutal dictatorship in Azerbaijan. But they are certainly moving in a direction that is beneficial to Ukraine, which in turn is beneficial to all of us, because the safety and security of Europe depends on what happens in Ukraine. And no matter what Trump and his group, his gaggle of ghouls and goblins and fools say, American prosperity is dependent on a peaceful and prosperous Europe. So Akron, Armenia and Azerbaijan had the war over Nagorno-Karabakh, and tensions were very high there. You probably know that Russia abandoned Armenia and couldn't do a thing because they're too overextended in Ukraine as it is to do anything about Armenia. All that they did was completely abandon the Armenians by emptying out the Soviet military base that was there and sending all the equipment to Ukraine. That's what they did. Armenia seems to have made some peace with the Azeris. They brokered a peace deal. They've got a U.S.-managed corridor so that the Azeris can transit to and from the Azeri exclave south of Yerevan. And they have cooperated on the Trans-Balkan pipeline so that they can move Kazakh oil and gas out of Kazakhstan, as well as Azeri gas and oil out of Azerbaijan, across Armenia, and Armenia is making money on that through the transit fees, across Armenia to Turkey, and then from Turkey into Europe. So we are hopeful. I would argue that what we should all be hoping for is that solid economics brings peace, a long-lasting, prosperous peace to both the people of Armenia and Azerbaijan. That's my fondest wish. Now we'll see. We always thought, right, that trade between nations decreased the risk of war. The problem is that not all nations or their leadership are rational actors. Who would ever have thought that the Russians would have flushed away their easy living spot with their European gas and oil customers? For what? For Ukraine? For a war they couldn't win? It's insane. It's absolutely insane to me. Okay. In some economic news from Russia, Russia's Minister of Economics downgraded the GDP growth forecast for 2025 from 2.4% to 1.5%. So the Russians are implicitly acknowledging that they are on the edge of recession themselves, that GDP growth has, right? Because we saw what looked like on paper 2 good years of GDP growth for the Russians, 4% plus a year. But of course, that was all a lie. It was all an illusion. Just the government printing money and pouring it into the defense industry. That's over now. The bad debt crisis for Russia is looming, and it's looming large. You put on top of that the hit against oil infrastructure, the Russians are in trouble. Not to mention inflation, Paul. It's a fair point, right? Now, it is worth pointing out that while the Russians are now projecting a 1.5% GDP growth for 2025, That is not the consensus amongst the IMF and economists. The IMF has downgraded their forecast for Russian GDP growth to 0.9%, less than 1% this year. While the consensus among economists seems to put it at somewhere between 0.8 and 1.2. So everybody seems to agree that it's hovering right around 1% for the year, except for the Russians, who want it to be 1.5%. No matter how you slice it, things are not all coming up roses for the Russian Federation. That's for fucking sure. Lithuania is proposing bypassing Hungary in EU accession talks. And that's something that the EU Parliament should have got off its ass and done a long time ago. These constant delaying tactics by Orban are obscene as he does the bidding of his master, Vladimir Putin. In a letter to the EU foreign ministers ahead of the upcoming EU foreign minister meeting, Lithuanian Foreign Minister Budras called for a 2030, just 5 years away, deadline for getting Ukraine and Moldova into the EU. He said that delays are geopolitically harmful and that Ukraine, particularly, he mentioned Ukraine. Ukraine is key to Europe's security and our long-term stability, which I couldn't agree with more, of course. A vote of 26, right? What are there? There's 27 votes in the European, of all the EU member states, right? If 26 of them vote to exclude Hungary, they'll be able to exclude Hungary. Now, that's a narrow margin, right? You can't have any holdouts. But there is so much frustration with Orban and his pro-Putin antics that it's possible they could pull it off. Certainly, it appears that there is growing support to take such a vote. Let's hope so, huh? The Russians are up to all their old tricks again, boy. Southwest of Pokrovsk, we saw a Russian infiltration group come in, 16 guys dressed as Ukrainian soldiers, which is a war crime, right? It's a violation of all the conventions and all of the treaties that Russia and everybody else has ever signed. There were no survivors. That's the bottom line. 16 came in, none went out. War crime committed, war crime ended, thanks to the Ukrainians. Michael, that's a great question. And I rather think, so Michael asked the question, if Moldova is admitted, does that include the breakaway Republic of Transnistria, the so-called breakaway Republic of Transnistria, which is basically just a Russian exclave, right? And Bamba Squeezer makes a good point. The current president of Poland is saying that he didn't say he would stop Ukrainian accession to EU. He said that he would oppose it until such time as a settlement was reached over the framing of some war crimes that Ukrainian nationals in German-occupied Ukraine committed during World War II. Now, what that looks like, I don't know. But opening those 80-year-old wounds, to me, is not very helpful. And it does go to the point that this guy that's in there now in Poland is not a friend of Ukraine. That's for sure. That's for sure. Okay. I want to send a big shout out to Mike Nally, who is the sponsor of tonight's live, first time live sponsor. Thank you, Mike. I really appreciate it. I also want to thank Nightshade, who has the Peter's Peeps group on the Book of Faces, Lars, who has the Discord server, and of course, the moderator team, best moderators on the Tickety Talk, Feisty, Maddie, Jay, Pete, and Travis. Thank you, guys. Okay. Questions, comments? Thanks, Ben Tilley. Thanks for thanking Mike. I appreciate that. I mean, so Be Nice is back, corrects my statement, saying Transnistria is not a Russian exclave. It is Moldovan territory occupied by Russia. And he's right. You know, that's a better way to say it. Did you hear about Russian drones in the German airspace? They were spotted in Thuringen. Flip, I didn't. Unless, is that the reason that those Typhoons got scrambled yesterday? Because I thought that was a Russian fighter jet. Well, thanks, home time, but I'm not Ukrainian. I'm American. Anthony Tommy Tom says, has EU and UK put more sanctions on Russia? No. But in light of recent events, the EU is preparing its 19th sanctions package. Yes. Could the Flamingos threaten the Russian Baltic Fleet? I'd have to get out a tape measure, Michael, but if it's within 3,000 kilometers and they had the permission of the Poles to fly those missiles over their airspace, which that alone might be a problem. There's a lot of civilian air traffic out there. So I don't know the answer to that. I don't think that's where they're going to use them. I think we're going to see them used on the Kerch Bridge. I think we're going to see them used on port facilities in Crimea, Novorossiysk, South Ossetia, probably oil infrastructure, hardened bunkers, those new concrete hangars that they're building to try to protect the jets. Engels Air Force Base is within range of the Flamingos. That's where the, what are they? The 160s, the Tu-160 bombers are located, as well as the Tu-95s. I would think that those would all be juicy, juicy targets for the Flamingos. But I'll tell you something, I don't know where they're going to use them. And my opinion on this matter is of little consequence. I trust the Ukrainian armed forces to use their limited reserves in the best possible way that they can. And I think we should all take that approach. You know, it's easy to criticize from our armchairs. Seawolf says something here that is echoed by a lot of people on the internet right now. The strike on the British Council is, in my view, an Article 5 moment. And that's I do believe, Seawolf, that you are correct, that is it's more complicated than being correct. It's a perfectly legitimate thing to say, what you're saying. And there are a lot of people out there on the internet echoing your sentiments. I think we all know that the political will doesn't exist for that to happen. But it sure would be something if it did. Need a flamingo at Mar-a-Lago, besides the pink plastic ones he has on the front lawn. Kypris has some advice for me. Make your Patreon and PayPal more seen and possible to copy and paste. It's a link, pal. Why would you need to copy and paste it? You just click on it and it takes you there. Hardly. Wouldn't that, you know, pal, I was just thinking about that today. Wouldn't it be nice to see the Kremlin in flames? Wouldn't that be a gut punch to the Russian psyche? Yeah, it would be. Can't wait to see Ukraine hit an oil refinery with a flamingo. Salisbury was more of an Article 5 than last night. Andreas says, hey, what about the Novichok poisoning in Salisbury, right, of the Russian defector and his daughter? That was an assassination attempt on British soil. I mean, if that's not an Article 5 violation, what is? The Russians have been assassinating the defectors on foreign soil in the open, in Germany, in the UK, in Bulgaria, in Poland, in Spain. I mean, and nobody says a word. Tulsi Gabbard sacked the CIA agent and doxed him. Where did that go? CIA agent working in Russia and disclosed his name today. Yes, she did. And it's not the first time this administration has doxed our own intelligence people. It's a crime and a sin. But really, it is a crime. Broke your arm, Paul. Sorry to hear it, pal. Anyone heard what came out of the Russian ambassador UK meet today? Nothing's going to come out of it, Andrew. It seems highly unlikely that anything is going to come out of it beyond diplomatic rhetoric. Let's hope Ukraine give Russia what for tonight. Let's hope so, Anthony. Well, like I said, there's word that oh no, I'm sorry. I said the wrong thing earlier. I said the Moscow pipeline. That's incorrect. It's the Druzhba pipeline. It's the Druzhba pipeline that feeds Ust-Luga. And it's the Druzhba pipeline that we believe is under attack tonight. Thanks, Arna. Yeah, in that Salisbury attack, an innocent bystander, a UK citizen, was killed. Thatcher was a lot of fun to watch on the TV. I mean, no matter what you thought of her, Seawolf, Thatcher was a lot of fun to watch on the TV. Let's be honest. Did a Portuguese politician call Trump out as a Ruski operative today? I didn't see that, John. I can't say. I'm unaware of that. Orban will be crying about oil again tomorrow. Probably. So the Russians are worried about Siberia refinery? I don't know. I think the Russians should be worried about every refinery. Novichok in Germany? Was that Novichok? You're thinking of the assassination of that guy in the park, right? I forget the details. I don't know, Roy. Ha, Renvox, nice. Less Neville Chamberlain's, more Peter's Peeps. I like it. Somebody put that on a t-shirt. Bertie liked Margaret Thatcher. You have a little thing for her? You like the idea of her hitting you with a rolled up newspaper? There's a very famous story by a guy named Christopher Hitchens about being smacked with a rolled up newspaper by Margaret Thatcher. Yeah, that they shot that guy, Pingu, right? Yeah, no, he was that was classic gun violence. Oh man, these stupid puzzles. Like, why is that not right? There we go. can't bear to look at him, let alone listen to the incoherent garbage he spews. Oh, Nicola, I thought we were friends. You see my wee Scottish flans mean I wasn't a Thatcher fan. Seawolf, that's awesome, man. We haven't had a decent PM here since Thatcher. Uh-oh. Them's fighting words. Okay, guys, we got 3 minutes left. I know, Nicola, I know. I was just kidding. We have 3 minutes left, so let me again thank Mike Nally, who's a first-time live sponsor. Maybe you would like to help keep this channel on the air, keep me here in Ukraine. The PayPal's in the description. All you have to do is click the link. Or in my bio, whatever it is, that bio page. Big thanks to Lars, who has the Discord server, Nightshade, who has the Peter's Peeps group, and of course, the best moderator team on the Tickety Talk. Thank you all. Thank you, Arn. Noon, Andreas. If anybody's in Kyiv, we're going to be at the Kachalka at noon tomorrow. I'm really looking forward to that, pal. Thanks for taking the time. Thanks, Ted. Thanks, Feisty. If anybody here is not a member of the Patreon, I would encourage you to join the Patreon, please. At least get a free account. Because we do stuff over there that is not suited to this format. One of those things are, over the course of the summer, I hosted 6 barbecues. One for some volunteers, for troops. One for my Laughter's the Best Medicine group, and then 4 for the English-speaking club. And those have been great oases of normalcy in an not normal world. And the Ukrainians that have been able to participate in them have had good days. We've all had good days. We've fed over 120 people. And the last one is this Saturday. So if anybody wants to help sponsor that or support that, just the PayPal's in the description. Just send a note that that's where you want that money to go. And I will make sure that it goes there. Flip was at one. Yeah. I made ribs for Flip. This Saturday, it's chicken, barbecued chicken, and Italian sausages on the grill. So it's going to be a nice day. The weather is perfect. Andreas, I hope I'm going to see you there too, but I'll see you tomorrow morning. I hope so too, Andrew. I hope it is a peaceful night here. Now, we've been talking a lot about whether or not the Russians were hoarding drones or whether we're hoarding drones for a big attack or whether they just didn't have them. And I think that what last night shows us is that both things are true. We haven't seen many drones coming in most nights for the last 2 weeks. And last night we saw only 600. Now, if they were hoarding drones, they should have been able to send 1,000 last night. But if they have to hoard them because they don't have them, because Ukraine has been striking the logistics pipeline for drones, drone parts, drone manufacturing, drone manufacturers, and of course the night skies, as well as stockpiles of them, warehouses of them. It could be that Ukraine is having a positive effect in creating a drone shortage. I don't know. We'll see tonight. If another 600 come in tonight, I'm wrong. $12:30? No problem, Andreas. That's fine. Well, Seawolf, that's extremely thoughtful. Thank you. It is a budget. No rib. We're doing it on a budget, this last one. Although I have to say, Norbert Hackoff, um, he covered almost the entire grocery bill the other day when I picked up the chicken and the sausages and stuff like that. Now, I still have to go back tomorrow for some more things. We're almost there. It's almost the whole thing is covered. But Norbert was a big help with that. It was amazing. Absolutely amazing the way he came through. But you're right, Arn. The last barbecue of the season is going to be on a little bit of a budget. Chicken and sausages. It's also likely to be the best attended based on the current RSVPs. We've averaged about 20 per barbecue. This weekend, maybe more. We'll see. Yes, Nicola, absolutely. I apologize. On the Boyan M class corvettes, I think they only hold 4 caliber cruise missiles. Can somebody Google that real quick? On a Buyan, Buyan-M class corvette, how many missiles does it carry fully loaded? Yeah, I think that those flamingos are going to fly to Ingalls, Flip. I do. You ever had Santa Maria tri-tip, Peter? I don't have any idea what that is. Oh, unless you mean the cut of beef, a tri-tip. But I've never heard it called Santa Maria, if that's what you mean. It's 8. Thank you, Renvox. Very popular in California. You don't see it on the East Coast of the United States. And the Ukrainians cut their beef entirely differently. Designology confirms the 8. So good. That's 8 missiles they can't launch every night from now on. Good. How much is beef there? $9 per pound ground. So, Bamba, I did pick up 2 kilos of burgers yesterday. And they were, if I remember correctly, they were like 269 hryvnia a pound. So that's about $6.25. That's about $6.25 for 100% ground beef. Well, we can't afford T-bones. Seawolf. We definitely cannot afford, even if everybody sent $5, we couldn't afford T-bones, pal. I'm thinking probably 40 people tomorrow. Because a lot of people only came to one over the summer and they want to go to the last one. And so I think tomorrow is going to be, or Saturday is going to be a busy day. It's going to be nice. Okay, so guys, it's 1:05. It's time for me to go to bed. Thanks everybody for hanging out. Thanks again to Mike Nally, who's the sponsor of tonight's live. Thanks to Nightshade, Lars, and the moderator team. Thanks to everybody for your positive feedback in the light of the trolls. I appreciate it. Yeah, let's hope we have a quieter night. You can tell, right? I was up a lot last night. And I'm irritable tonight and distracted easily. So I apologize for that. But I will see everybody tomorrow. Jeff, I wish. It's been so long. All right, I'll talk to you later, man. Thanks, Pip.